Hey everybody, it's Kevin. Today is steering day out in the garage. I'm gonna guess I'll call it like phase one of my journey to add Hydro Assist to the Wrangler. I guess I'm calling it a phase one thing because I don't have the RAM or any of the tabs or any of that to mount underneath yet. What I want to do is get the box and the new pump, remote reservoir pump, et cetera, put all that in first, get it all working properly, make sure I don't have any issues. And then I will work on getting the RAM mounted. And I just really got to tie the hoses in at that point. It won't be that bad. But this way, at least, I've just got a lot less variables to worry about, for troubleshooting and making sure that everything is the way I'd like it to work, reliable and no leaks and no issues. So I'm going to start just by swapping in the gear and swapping in the pump. And today I got it all ripped apart, so let's take a look at it. As you can see, I've got drained all the oil, got the gear out, pulled out of the truck and on the bench. And here they are. Here's the TJ box next to the Durango box, which looks very similar, and it really is very similar. It's just a little bit larger. Kind of hard to perceive the difference here in a video, but the diameter here is just a little bigger than the TJ, and it's just a little bigger here. Well, it's nothing really super major. It's just a little bit more stout all around. I don't know if that translates into a superior gear or not, but I had this one available, and so it is the one that got drilled and tapped for the Hydro Assist hoses. Right now I just have plugs in there, capped off, so I can run the gear as a standard gear. And then of course I have the pump out. This is the original. This is actually a pump out of a 5.3 LS because the 6-liter came with Hydro Boost, and I don't have Hydro Boost, so I had to switch it so I would only have the one return line and the one pressure line. And in order to do that, it was just easier to pull an entire bracket out in the salvage yard to get this pump. And it was working fine. But what I want to do is put in this pump, which is out of a Chevy Express van. And the vans have a remote reservoir because a van, if you've ever seen the engine bay of a van, that's really tight and quite convoluted. So they run a hose down instead of having this reservoir built into the pump that holds the fluid. There's just a simple can around the pump with no reservoir to speak of, really. And a hose travels down from a remote reservoir that I have mounted here, up high. And it will just be a simple hose running down from this port here down to the one on the pump. And that'll get my filler neck up high, which is going to be a lot nicer than where it was before. It was down here, way down somewhere near this bolt down here, which of course it is about as long as my arm. If you look, there's my, it was down there a long ways. It was a real pain to check it, a pain to fill it if need be, or anything like that. So this is going to be a lot nicer because it's right up here next to the washer fluid. Simple to get to. And also the most critical thing about it, other than the convenience of it, is that it'll be higher than the cooler behind the grill, which is out of a Chevy Suburban that I just pirated out of the salvage yard. But this way my reservoir will be higher than the cooler, which will allow all the air to escape and not be trapped in here, where the LS power steering pump was way like down here somewhere. relative to that cooler, so the air would always be trapped in the cooler and never come out. And of course that's not acceptable. So over here on the Jeep, you can kind of get a good look at what I've done to the front end, being it's a custom setup. How I got it built here with a little bump out to fit the gear. And in the process of that, I guess there was a frame structural cross member that used to run from here across to the other side. If you're familiar with TJ guys will know what I'm talking about. That I had to cut out so I could drop this winch in down low, keep it down low below the grill. As you can see, it's, other than the solenoid box, it's pretty low to give me good flow, good coolant, or I mean cool air flow across the radiator and the coolers and so forth. But of course, in the process of doing that, I made this custom front end and all that, but I cut that cross member out. And being paranoid like I am, I was worried about the rigors of the trail and the abuse this thing would see, being it's an off-road rig. So I added back in some structure across here. I welded in, this is a solid bar stock. And I welded a plate to the frame, gusseted it back, and then I drilled and tapped the holes into the frame. On the other side, same thing. I added a reinforcement plate to the frame, and then I drilled and tapped in the holes. I don't have all the bolts in it now because of course I had to take this out to get the steering gear out. So I have the bolts out. There's another pair of bolts that bolt here to support this is the center grill support body mount, but I'd basically tied that in. This ties back into the winch frame and ties into there then. So then that's all kind of all hooked together to give my winch area a little bit more support for, you know, in case I got to really pull hard on the Jeep to get it out of a real bad spot. It gives it a little bit extra reinforcement for the frame and for the winch area. So my hope is that that will prevent any, you know, fatiguing of the frame that I won't notice now, but 5-10 years from now might start to appear. And of course, I don't want that. And since we're down here, we might as well take a quick look around it. You can see here where I cut out part of the frame and boxed it in to make a little bit more room for my track bar mount to clear when the axle is articulating. And I fish plated it in, boxed it in, reinforced it. Real nice. So, and just a quick look at my 60, a little bit up close and personal with it. Here you can see the brake lines that I hard piped across from the corner, and the other one coming from the other corner. They meet in the middle here at this T-block right here, where they head up on top of the third link and head out towards the master cylinder. The other line coming down is the ARB 6mm line that I have to a banjo style fitting there, which is nice and low profile. Keeps it down about at the elevation of the bridge, or the axle truss, I mean. So that kind of looks real nice. It looks good, number one, but also it keeps it low pro so it isn't bumping into anything or catching and snagging on any of my vent line that runs up through here or anything like that. And of course you can see that the drag link is just kind of hanging out there because the box is yanked out. Pitman arm's just hanging there. I'll be putting that together here shortly, right after I make this video. So that'll be phase one, and I'll work my way into getting that all put together. and I want to get it running, get it working, get all the bugs worked out of it before I move on to the next phase. Since I got this nice wide open space in here that normally wouldn't be here, it gives me a chance just to show off a little bit more of what's going on under here. I've got these are C6 Corvette manifolds that fit real well. You know, it ain't a lot of room there between the steering. That's the TJ steering block or bearing block or pillow block, I guess, whatever you'd like to call it, that holds the steering shaft. That's the original TJ one. Now it's been cut free and relocated slightly, but you can see there's plenty of room there. You know, an inch or a mile. A win is a win, right? That's the cable for the alternator, which I'll put back on. And another look, since we're on talking about steering today, up there is the TJ unit, of course, coming down right about here somewhere, I'd say, roughly right here where I have this bolt that didn't exist from the factory. This is where I bolted it together to mate it to the steering out of the KJ that I swiped from the salvage yard. Well, I didn't swipe it, obviously, I paid for it, but procured, I should say, I guess. And that is the carrier bearing assembly for the KJ that I modified pretty heavily and welded it in position to carry that second bearing, so that I could, below there, I could have this double knuckle, which looks a little crazy right now because it's falling down, but there's the original TJ coupling that couples to the steering gear. And right about here is where I cut it from the TJ original and mated it to the slip fitting out of the Liberty and the other knuckle from the Liberty. So basically what I have is, you know, it starts out TJ, got a little bit of Liberty there in the middle, and back to the original TJ at the end. And that's what gets my input from the steering wheel down to the steering gear. So, you know, and that was just a little bit of what it took to stretch this frame out, or stretch the box out and get it out front, as far out front as I could get it. I mean, it's essentially at the front of the vehicle, other than this bull bar that's there to give that and the winch a little bit of protection if I would happen to do something foolish. And there you have it. So we'll get to work on getting these bolted in and bleeding it out. I'll pick the tires up off the ground, put them on jack stands probably. You know, once I have it all hooked up, I'll pick it up, put some jack stands under it so I can just cycle the steering back and forth without any weight of the Jeep on the wheels, just to bleed out the air out of the system. I'll do all that long before I ever start the motor. You don't want to start it dry, of course. You can just burn the pump out immediately. So I'll definitely fill it full of fluid, cycle the wheel all the way, lock to lock, very gently, very slowly, and just to let the air burp out of it. And then I'm going to walk away from it for, you know, 15 or 20 minutes. Come back, top it off, of course, cycle it back and forth. And I'll do that maybe a couple times till I'm not really seeing any action. Then I'll bump the motor over, fire it up, get some power to it. If I hear anything funny at all, I'll kill it immediately, but it should by then. It'll be fine. I'll be able to start it, let it run, cycle the steering back and forth, same thing, but with the Jeep running. And if all checks out and there are no leaks, then I will take it for a burn, you know, and see how it works. Hopefully I don't have any leaks, and then I'm going to get the next phase of it rolling by getting the parts in, getting all the stuff I need, starting to figure out the geometry, locations of where I'm going to put everything. I got a lot of, I got to probably build some bracketry, fab up some kind of mounts. But this at least gets me halfway there, instead of, trying to take on the whole thing in one shot. I'm taking it in steps, and I might lose a little fluid in the process by having to pull those ports out and tie in, the hydraulic lines. But really, that's pretty pretty minor in the big scope of things. So I feel like this is a good setup. So back to work. Talk to you later.